Can you please confirm if you can see me and hear me properly? Can you confirm once the audio and the video both are fine? Perfect, 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 perfect. Perfect. Thank you so much for confirming that. So once again, a very, very warm welcome to all of you. Good evening to everyone. I hope all of you are doing good. We are here once again for the mains based current affairs webinar where we will be discussing important topics from GS1 and GS2. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, good evening, good evening. Hello. Good evening, good evening, good evening. Perfect. We'll wait for one more minute. Let others also join in. Those who have any issue with audio in the video, I would advise you to just quickly refresh your screen. Please refresh your screen very quickly if you have any issue. Also, I hope all of you know the UPSC civil service examination notification is out already. I hope all of you have seen the notification. It's a long notification, as it usually is the case. You don't have to read it entirely. A lot of the pages of the notification are just about the syllabus of individual optional papers. So you don't have to read that. However, I would advise you to read the important pointers from the UPSC notification. Make sure that you have everything in place, especially if you're someone who is hoping to get certain reservation from certain categories. Please make sure you read exactly what are the documents you require, the years for which the document will be required. For example, if you're, let's say, hoping to get reservation in the OBC category, then your certificate has to be from which year onwards, or let's say if you're hoping to get reservation in the EWS category, then from what year is the reservation candidate certificate applicable. So please make sure to read all of that. The last date to register, as you know, is 21st of February. Please, please, please make sure you fill up the form before that. Please don't leave it to the last moment. Perfect. So a lot of you have joined in all time. It seems like we are good to go. Perfect. Now, as you know, the Byju's prelims examination test series has been going on for a long time, since the 6th of November. We have a test every weekend, every Sunday. You give this test as per your schedule. I hope all of you have been very, very serious in attending these test papers. Make sure you keep a good track of your score. Make sure that you see what are your weaknesses. Work on that so that your score can improve in the coming years. Now, these are the topics of discussion that we have for you today. Let's quickly go through them. We will be focusing on the NCPCR draft guidelines. So NCPCR is National Commission for Protection of Child Rights. So they have given new guidelines specifically about what are the cases in which children can be tried as an adult. Then we'll be discussing what the obscenity law in India, how does it work? It was also in the news. Then we'll be discussing about India-Egypt ties. As you know, the Egyptian president was in India as the chief guest of the Republic Day parade. That has a lot of consequence. The government doesn't just randomly choose anyone as the chief guest. So we will be discussing the consequence of that as well. Then the Supreme Court also recently had given some judgment about living will and passive euthanasia. We'll be discussing the concept of living will. How has it changed in India after the Supreme Court judgment, the before and after? Then the debate of marriage laws for minors in India, the Supreme Court is deciding whether personal laws of certain religion, they should be given the preference, or we should have the same minimum age of marriage across all religions in India. Then we will be discussing an important topic from Kurukshetra magazine of January. We'll be discussing realizing Sehkar se Samriddhi in simple terms. We'll be talking about the cooperative movements in India, their importance, their significance, how is it that they can actually play the role of a game changer. And in the end, we have a news about a famous temple called the Sundarbans temple. The temple, unfortunately, that has been facing certain wind erosion because of its location. We'll be discussing what that is, the location of the temple, any significance that the temple has, so on and so forth. These are the things that we have lined up for you. So without any further ado, let's start with the very first topic. What is it that we have to study? The first topic that we have is the draft guidelines that have been released by NCPCR. Now, I told you earlier also what is NCPCR. NCPCR stands for National Commission for Protection of Child Rights. Just like we have other statutory bodies, the National Commission for Minorities, for Women, Human Rights Commission, so on and so forth. Similarly, to look into the child rights, we have the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights. Now, what have they said and what is the issue all about? As you know, if you go back a few years, the law in India was very clear. If you are below the age of 18 years, then the maximum punishment that you could have been given for any crime was 3 years only. In other words, a few years back, before the Juvenile Justice Act, if you are below 18, doesn't matter what kind of crime that you have committed, you are only entitled to get a punishment of maximum of 3 years, not more than that. However, that changed. How did that change? That changed because of the very infamous Nirbhaya case in Delhi. You might have at least heard this name if you don't remember, the Nirbhaya case in Delhi. Now, in the Nirbhaya case in Delhi, there were multiple people who were involved. The interesting part was one of the people accused in the case was a minor. One of the person who was accused in the case had not touched the age of 18. In fact, he was just a few days below the age of 18 years. The lawyers were successful in proving that he was not 18 years of age. That is why, while all others in the Nirbhaya case got death sentence, the juvenile for the same crime, for being participating in the same crime, only got a punishment of 3 years because that was a maximum punishment that could have been given. That is why after 3 years he was released from the prison. Now, what has happened is after that there are some other cases that have come up because in the Nirbhaya case the public got involved, people got so angry. How is it that someone accused of such a heinous crime can be let off after 3 years only? There was a demand from large section of the society that the law must change, and that is when we had the Juvenile Justice Act. The Juvenile Justice Act said that if someone is between 16 and 18 years of age, please do understand this. The Juvenile Justice Act said if someone is between 16 and 18, and if at the time of committing the crime, the person acted like an adult. Now, when you say acted like an adult, that means if the person knew the consequences of the crime, if the person can't say, no, 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 I did not know, I'm harming him, I'm hurting him, etc. No. If the person behaved like an adult, if the person knew the consequences of the crime, then even if the person is between 16 and 18, that person will be tried as an adult. That was a Juvenile Justice Act of 2015. As I told you, the Juvenile Justice Act of 2015 specifically said between 16 and 18 years of age, even if someone commits a crime, they can be tried as an adult, but only in case of heinous offenses. Now, who decides all these things? Who decides that if there's a 17-year-old and the 17-year-old has committed a certain crime, would the crime be considered as a heinous crime or not? For that, a particular board of experts will be set up. So there will be board of experts that will comprise of psychologists, that will be comprised of child right activists. All those people will talk to the child and then they will try to understand the mental condition of that person. They will now decide whether the person is actually behaving as an adult or not. And that is how they will be able to take a call. Those who are asking JJ is juvenile justice. JJ is juvenile justice. Now, this is what the Juvenile Justice Act is. Now, if you actually see the Juvenile Justice Act, as I told you earlier as well, the Juvenile Justice Act was mainly an aftermath of the Nirbhaya case. However, now what has happened? So basically, the Juvenile Justice Act put this power into the hands of this board of experts who would have psychologists, who would have these people who know about the child psychology, and they will talk to the child. They will assess the offender child. They will then arrive at the conclusion, and even after they say that yes, the person is guilty, the person can be tried as a senior, then the person can be sentenced to jail except giving a death sentence, or death sentence is still not allowed, or life imprisonment without the possibility of release. These two things cannot be done. Let me quickly repeat what I said. After the Nirbhaya case, the Juvenile Justice Act 2015 came into being. In that Juvenile Justice Act that came into being, the idea was, if someone is between 16 and 18 years of age and a heinous crime has been committed, there will be a board of experts set up having child psychologists. They will then look into it whether this is a case where the person actually acted as an adult. If yes, then the case would consider the person as an adult. However, in that case also, the person can be given the punishment. However, in that case also, death punishment will not be given, and life imprisonment without a possibility of release before life ends will not be given. So jail term more than 3 years will be given, but not as such death sentencing and everything. Now, why is it that we have this discussion? The Supreme Court is hearing a case related to murder of a class 2 student in Haryana, that was in Gurgaon, allegedly by a 16-year-old. Now, what is this case? There's a very famous school, I would not like to name the school. There's a very famous school in Haryana where a few years back there was a case of a class 11th kid actually killing a class 2nd kid. And there are a lot of news stories that came out. First, they put the blame on the school staff, some school driver, etc. And then it was found out it was actually this class 11th kid. And when they were asked, why did you do that? A lot of excuses came out. He did not even know the small kid. Apparently, it was suggested that they just wanted to ensure the school is closed for the test. They were not prepared for the test, so they planned, let's do something so that the school actually is closed. So that is the intention why this crime was committed. Again, I will not name the school. You, if you're interested, you can go ahead and see the name of the school. Anyway, so what the Supreme Court has said is, sorry, what the NCPCR has said is that you have to ensure that the child that is being assessed by the experts gets a fair treatment. Understand this. The responsibility of the NCPCR, that is the commission that has been formed to look into the protection of the child rights, their first responsibility is towards the child. Their first responsibility is to make sure that the child gets the treatment that he or she deserves. So you might on one hand say, oh, he killed a second class child, he should be hanged or whatever. But the responsibility of NCPCR is to actually look into the interest of that particular child who has been accused. So NCPCR has said that there should be proper assessment of the child. The experts in the psychological panel should undertake a study very seriously, because if you say that a person has to be treated as an adult, it can have long lasting impact. In fact, they say that there have to be appropriate specific guidelines in place. We cannot randomly give this power to the experts in the group to just see whether or not the person should be treated as an adult or not. There should be specific guidelines in place to see whether the person actually acted as an adult or not. These are the major guidelines that they have given. Number one, the physical ability of the child. When I say the child, that is the accused. The physical ability of the child should also be looked into. For example, was the person physically capable enough to commit the crime, or was he being forced by other people to commit the crime? The mental capacity also. What was the mental state of the kid when he committed the crime? Was he actually suffering from some mental diseases? Was he living in an environment which was unhealthy for him? All these things should be taken into consideration before deciding this. Then we should also understand what are the consequences that the child might have to suffer because of this. Most importantly, before the medical board, the expert board actually takes a decision, the expert board first should build a repo. Building a repo means they should first try to familiarize with the kid. They should not just come and say, we are taking an interview, we will decide whether you will be given more punishment or up to 3 years only. Rather than that, the experts should actually ensure that they build a proper rapport with the kid so that the child is comfortable with them and the child can speak openly and honestly about what he feels and why did he do such a thing. Other reports of the board should also look into the background of the child. Why is the child doing this? Talk to the parents also, talk to the school staff also, and only then such a decision should be taken. Now, these are the guidelines issued by the NCPCR, that is the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights. How are they implemented? How successful are they? That remains to be seen. This is a kind of question that you can see here. Is there merit in the idea of considering juveniles as adults in case of heinous crimes? Critically analyze. Please make sure that you try and write these kind of answers. Let me quickly take up a few questions. A lot of people are asking, what is repo? Building repo basically means making yourself familiar with someone. I'll give you an example. Let's say you meet someone for the first time. When you go and meet someone for the first time, would you first question, would you ask, what is your salary? Tell me. No. If you want to get to that, you will first start with other conversations, try to build a good relationship, try to build a repo. Repo means a friendly chat, making sure there is a kind of a connect between the two, so that the other person opens up to you and then you can ask whatever you want. But even then, never ask someone's their salary. Okay. Let me quickly take up a few questions. I have a few questions that have been asked here. First, how can we prove that a particular person is thinking as an adult in order to be considered as an adult in the Juvenile Justice Act? So, Veena, the good part is that you won't have to decide that. That is the job of child psychologists. That is what the child psychologists do. That is what they are trained to do. So, don't worry, UPSC will not ask you how is it that you will decide the child is adult or not. Let it be with the child experts, they will decide that. Next, Yashaswini has a question. Came into force in 2016, but why it's been highlighted in the news? Actual takeaway. So the reason why we are discussing this is because the NCPCR guidelines have been issued now. That is why. The 2016 is the case. So basically, the reason why we are discussing this is because the NCPCR draft guidelines have been released. That is why it is in the news. Anjali, that answers your question as well. The NCPCR guidelines have come in now, and that is why it is in the news. Let me see. Okay. Then I have a question. If a minor killed an adult, then he will be charged under JJ Act or not? No, no. So, who did you kill? What crime did you commit? Or who is the person who is affected by the crime? That doesn't matter. Whether a juvenile killed an adult or a juvenile killed another juvenile, that doesn't matter. What will matter is again the mental state of the kid when that juvenile committed the crime or is accused of committing the crime. Was he acting after understanding what will be the consequences, or was just acting as a child? So that is how you actually have to understand that. The law doesn't say that if you will take into consideration against whom the crime has been committed. Then I have a couple of questions very similar to this. How should we lean more towards the positive side of this guideline? It depends entirely upon you in these kind of questions because the government has already made a law to treat certain juveniles as adults. Yes, you would have to lean towards positive because the government approach has also been the same. In this kind of a question, it's good to take one side, but it is expected that you talk about both the sides. For example, the good part or why it should be done merit. You can give multiple examples. You can give examples of the Nirbhaya case as well. You can give examples of how there was a juvenile in the Nirbhaya case who got released after 3 years, while the others for the same kind of punishment, for the same kind of crime, actually had to have death sentence. So yes, there is merit in that idea as well, because at the end of the day, for a lot of other things we are seeing that at the end of the day, the government is bringing laws for a lot of things, be it the drinking age, be any other things. There are a lot of youngsters who are now open to this idea. A lot of youngsters have access to a lot of other technologies that makes them adult much quicker. That is why there is merit in that idea. The demerit part mainly would be there is still a lot of randomness involved as to how do you decide whether a person should be an adult or not. Yes, there are experts that have been roped into this system, but again, there's always a possibility that somewhere down the line there might be an error. So that is usually the good and bad part of the argument. Okay, I am getting adjust the sound. Is there an issue with the sound? Just give me a moment. Didn't change anything. Give me a moment. Let me look into that. Just give me 1 minute. I think if there is a mic issue, maybe is it okay now? Is it okay now? Because if it is not okay, then you'll have to give me a couple of minutes. I'll go and change the mic. Fine now? Okay. Okay. Fine. Okay. Perfect. 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 I have received okay, fine. You can stop. Okay, fine now. Okay. Perfect. So we'll continue with this mic. In case the issue persists further, do let me know. I'll change the mic and then we'll start again. So don't worry about that. Okay. Perfect. 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 Okay. Those who missed it, the demerit part mainly was about still there is a lot of randomness of how it is decided the person should be considered as an adult or not. Yes, you have child psychologists, but the problem is when you have certain people deciding whether a person should be tried as an adult or not, there will always be possibility of certain errors. And that is the biggest demerit in this entire case. Perfect. Now, the second topic we want to discuss is about the obscenity laws in India. Now, the word obscenity is very, very common. It is very unfortunate, but even our news websites, you go and open up the prominent news website and you see there are different types of news as compared to what you're expecting. There are different types of photos, videos, there are different types of clickbait material that is put there. All of that has been now entering into the field of obscenity. Now, there are a lot of laws in India that restrict obscenity in India. Now, what exactly are these laws? What is obscenity? This is what we would like to discuss here. Now, what is actually obscenity? Let's try and understand. Let me explain this in very layman terms. Okay. Obscenity very simply means if you are highlighting or showing something vulgar. Now, vulgar can be, let's say, if you are semi nude or nude. It can also be if you are, let's say, spreading a very strong offensive language. Let's say if you are objecting to someone's personality, all of that can be considered as obscene. You see a lot of people not wearing appropriate clothes when they're out in the public or not behaving appropriately. All of that can come in the category of obscenity. So that is what obscenity is in very layman terms. Now, there are laws in India that try to prevent obscenity. For example, in the Indian Penal Code, Section 292, 293, 294, all of these deal with obscenity. All of these talk about what is obscenity, what will be prohibited, what will not be prohibited, so on and so forth. Now, usually, and I would use this here as well, you are not expected to remember different sections of the IPC. You are expected to remember articles or uh, constitutional amendments in the constitution, but you are not expected to remember what are the different sections in the IPC. But because these are the ones that are in the news, so we'll discuss a few of these. There are three sections in the IPC, the Indian Penal Code, that mainly talk about obscenity. Section 292, for example, says any content will be deemed to be obscene if it appeals to prurient interest or if its effects tend to deprive or corrupt persons likely to read, see, or hear the content. In simple terms, the idea is if someone is watching a specific content and it corrupts the person's mind, it actually leads to a different kind of thinking in the mind that might be considered as an obscene content. And there are so many examples. I'll give you an example. A lot of times you see many people who have been accused of sexual offenses, when they are tried, when they are investigated, they say that I got the idea of doing this because I saw this movie. I got the idea of doing this because I saw someone doing it on the screen, etc. That means that whatever the person saw in the movie or on the app, that had a negative impact on the mind, that actually impacted how the person would behave. That means that that content can be in the category of obscene. So obscenity will be something that corrupts a person's mind, those who are reading it, seeing it, or hearing the content. Section 293 criminalizes the sale, distribution of these objects to anyone who is under the age of 20 or in any attempt to do so. Now, see, remember something here. This is not really something that is entirely banned in India. For example, when you see movies being released, there are different certifications given to movies. So even adults movies have a specific category. They are given a A rating, adult rating, and when they are released, only people above a certain age are allowed to see those movies. So it is not that it is completely prohibited or banned. Section 293 says that sale distribution of these objects shall be banned to anyone who is under the age of 20. Now, the interesting part is this is a bailable offense. Now, what is the difference between bailable and non-bailable? Let's try and understand this. Bailable versus non-bailable. The very common mistake that occurs here is many people have a mistake of thinking non-bailable means you will not get bail. No, that is not what it meant by non-bailable. So there are two types of crimes that you can commit. Certain crimes are called bailable, others are in the category of non-bailable. Let's try and understand the difference. Bailable means that you have the right to get the bail. Bailable means, let's say if you are charged with a certain offense, these are usually small offenses, minor offenses. You go to magistrate, tell the magistrate, I want bail. You will be asked to put some paperwork, guarantee, etc., sign here and there, and you will be given a bail. That is called a bailable offense. Then there are non-bailable offenses as well. Non-bailable offense does not mean you will not get bail. Non-bailable offense only means you do not have the right to bail. Meaning that in this case, the magistrate will decide whether or not the bail has to be given or not. In this case, you don't have the right. So the magistrate can deny also, magistrate can say yes also. It depends on the magistrate. It's not that you alone will have the right. So bailable means you have the right, so you will be given the bail, just ask for it. Non-bailable, you can ask for it, but it depends on the magistrate whether magistrate thinks that you have not committed a very serious offense, that yes, you should be allowed to go, then you will be allowed to go. So this comes in the category of bailable offense anyway. Section 294 also prohibits these acts and songs in public spaces as well. So even if you own it, for example, let's say you have a movie that's an adult movie, you own it, you're above 20, no problem with that. But you cannot start displaying it in an open public space. That will also be banned. All these laws in the IPC are pretty old laws. At a time when we did not have a lot of social media, when we did not have other kinds of ways to spread messages. But you also know in the past decade or so, the speed at which social media has come into our lives, WhatsApp, Instagram, TikTok, all of these, that means the old laws are not really made for these kind of problems. So the government of India realized this and also wrote these provisions in the IT Act. So the IT Act has a section 67A. This IT Act also says that sexually explicit act in electronic form would also attract certain punishment. So it's not just about printing, it's not just about releasing a video or selling DVDs or CDs, etc. It is also about not publishing this in electronic form as well. Now, and I already see a lot of things here as well. The problem with these kind of things, the problem with obscenity is it is very subjective. For me, something may be obscene. For someone else, they might say, no, this is art, this is not obscene. For someone who is, let's say, not wearing a shirt, For some people, they may say, oh, such a confident person, such a good body. Yes, it should be like this. For other people, the same may be called obscenity. So, the biggest problem with obscenity, not just in India, but across the world, is how do you decide? How do you decide what is allowed, what is not allowed? It is very subjective, like many other laws. For example, even when you talk about freedom of speech and expression, what should be allowed, what should not be allowed, how much freedom is too much freedom, or how much freedom should be allowed, all of that is very subjective because it depends on how the person is interpreting it. Now, there is one very interesting kind of a test that has been used usually by judiciary. It was used in UK long time back in 1868. It is called the Hicklin test. Now, what is the Hicklin test? Hicklin test very simply means a work can be considered obscene if a portion of it is found to deprave or corrupt those minds who are open to such influences. Again, no new definition. The same definition, other words, has been used in our IPC. The section 292 that we discussed, it's same only. So the problem here is again, how do you decide if the mind has been corrupted or not? There is no definition of this. For some people, their mind be corrupted. For some people, they would just be having fun. For example, if you say that there are some people who were involved in the Nirbhaya case and they say we got this idea by watching a movie or whatever, the point is many other people also would have watched the same thing that they watched, but others did not get this idea. By looking at the same movie, looking at the same picture, looking at the same photo, 10 people might get different ideas in their mind. So, how do you decide the mind is corrupted? How do you decide the mind is not corrupted? That is still something that is very, very difficult, almost impossible to ascertain. Now, the government of the Supreme Court, if you see, especially, has said that Hicklin test is a very old test. Now, we don't want to go ahead with this. This is a test of 1860s. Now, we should look into the idea of obscenity with a new sense. For example, the Supreme Court has said that when you look at a picture, let's say there's a picture of a person who is nude or semi nude or whatever, the Supreme Court has said that you have to understand the context of the picture. You can't just look at the person in the photo and say, yes, this is obscene. What is the photo trying to represent? What is it that the idea of the photo is? And then you have to decide, is it obscene or is it not obscene? They have to decide after looking at the photograph as a whole, and then you have to give it context. But again, the problem exists in how do you decide, how do you interpret that? First, at the time of your arrest, it will be dependent on the police. Let's say tomorrow I go to the police and say, sir, do you know this? See this photo, this person is circulating this photo to everyone. Now the policeman will decide. If the police thinks, yes, this seems to be obscene, then the police would arrest you. If the police thinks, oh, this is not obscene, grow up, have an open mind, then you will not be arrested. So the problem here is there is actually a lot of discretion, first at the level of the police who will decide whether to arrest you or not. And then if you are arrested and the case actually goes to the court, then the same discretion would then be at the hands of the judges to decide whether to actually punish you or not. This is a big, big, big problem. And this is why the obscenity laws have never been successful, not just in India, but in most countries. The only countries where these kind of laws can be successful are those countries which are very, very conservative. So those countries where the governments are ready to kill their people or are ready to jail their people, even for one single thing that they do not like, those are the only countries where these kind of laws can be successful. But countries where governments are more liberal, the countries where the people should be given certain more rights, in those countries, these kind of laws are very, very, very difficult to actually run properly. Uh, I have a question from Varsha. Will body shaming come under obscenity? I do not think so. But again, as I said, the problem is there is no definition of it. So I think the judges will decide, but I do not think, in my limited knowledge, I do not think body shaming would come under obscenity. Nishtha has a question. Nishtha is a name of a very old friend of mine. Nishtha has a question. Why is objectification of a woman's body not considered as obscene as in Bhojpuri songs? Again, the problem is, Nishtha, There is no one who can answer that, because just like, and you might agree this or not, just like beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder, obscenity also lies in the eyes of the beholder. That is a sad reality. Something that may be obscene to you, and if you start saying that I should ban it, thousands and lakhs of people will say, no, 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 don't ban it. This is talent. This is not obscenity. So it depends entirely upon who the person is, who is deciding, who is actually taking that answer, or who is taking that call. So again, for you or for someone else, there may be obscenity when you see certain dance numbers, when you see certain item numbers, or any movie industry that you talk about. But again, it depends on the interpretation of the judiciary at the end of the day. That is a part of the problem. Okay. As I told you, those who are asking who will decide is it obscene or not, as you know, police will decide first whether to arrest you or not, and then at the end of the day, the judges will decide if you have to be given punishment under this or not. The judges feel that yes, this is obscene, then yes, their interpretation is required. If they feel this is not obscenity, so basically you have to hope that if there's a case of obscenity against you, just hope that you have a liberal judge who's hearing your case, and not a judge who is not very fond of these kind of songs. Okay, perfect. The third important topic we want to take up, that was in the news in the past couple of weeks, mainly was India Egypt ties. The reason why we are specifically discussing this is because, as you know, the Egyptian president was in India as a part of the Republic Day celebrations. He was the president at the Republic, or he was the chief guest, I'm sorry, at the Republic Day parade. Now, India Egypt ties are very interesting in a lot of various ways. In fact, we had discussed this slightly earlier as well, how India Egypt ties are important. But I'll add one more very interesting dimension to it. See, India and Egypt go a long way back. If you look at the India Egypt ties, you will see that these are two of the oldest civilizations in the world, the Nile civilization and then the Indus Valley civilization. However, the interesting part is that even today, the significance for both the countries is very, very, very high. I'll give you a certain context about Egypt first. Let's try and understand Egypt first. So, if you look at Egypt, Egypt has a long history of having army generals as the president. So army generals usually become president. Now, you might say it is a arm or army takeover, military takeover like in Pakistan, but not really. This is slightly different. So what happens is there's a long tradition in Egypt that the army generals who retire, then they contest the president election, and usually they win. And when they win the election, for example, right now the current president also, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, when he had the election some years back, when he won, he said that 97% people voted for me. 97% was the official figure who actually voted for President al-Sisi. Now the problem is, see, the reality is in no democracy, doesn't matter how great you are, doesn't matter how much people love you, in no democracy 97% people will vote for you. That is a reality. Now the problem thus is, if you look at al-Sisi, he is also a former army general only. So there are a lot of question marks over the way that Egyptian democracy actually works. There is democracy, there are elections, people vote, but then how is it that only army generals get most of the votes? How is it the army generals get 95, 97, 98% votes? This is still a big question mark. The interesting part is before him, before Al Sisi, who was the president? The president was a guy called Morsi, ex president. This Mr. Morsi, who was the ex president, he was an exception because he was not from the army. Mr. Morsi was not from the army, he was actually a common politician. It was very rare for him to become the president. This was done because the people in Egypt had actually gone ahead and protested against the armed forces. They had said, we do not want more generals from the armed forces, we want a politician. And that is how Morsi actually became the president, but for a very short tenure. In some months only, he was dismissed, And that is how Abdel Fattah al-Sisi actually came to power. So the way in which the current president of Egypt came to power, this is still a question mark. Although many nations did not really object to it, the reason is Egypt is a very important country for many parts of the world. You know, Egypt is important because it actually controls the Suez Canal. As all of you know the importance of Suez Canal, the Suez Canal is the one that ensures that any trade from Europe to Asia or Asia to Europe is done in a much shorter time period. Otherwise, if you're actually sending a ship from Europe to Asia, you have to go and then circumvent Africa. That will take a lot of time, increase the cost a lot of times, and that is why with the Suez Canal, you can actually take a shortcut and reach from Europe to Asia in a very short time. Suez Canal, in fact, is a big source of revenue for Egypt, and that is why no country in the world usually wants to have bad relationship with Egypt. India also understands that we have maintained good relationship with Egypt, but that is not the only reason. India has always had great relationship with Egypt. As we had discussed earlier as well, India, Egypt were the founding members of the non-aligned movement. India, Egypt, Ghana, Indonesia, Yugoslavia. These were the nations that actually made sure that non-aligned movement came into being. Egypt has a very interesting look to a country. See, with Egypt, first it's an African country, and second it is also an Arab country. So they actually check both the boxes. It's a country that is a part of the Arab world also, with which India wants to maintain good relations. And it's an African country also, again, a continent where India has a lot of interest. So we have to ensure that with Egypt, we maintain a lot of good relations. And that is why we have ensured that there's constant communication with Egypt. So with Egypt, we have always been having a lot of interaction. Our leaders going to Egypt, Egyptian leaders coming to India, it is not very odd, just that we don't really talk about it quite a lot. There is one very interesting side to the story apart from this as well. That interesting side is India is hoping to sell weapons to Egypt. India now, as you know, has given a lot of push towards its own indigenous weapon manufacturing industry. Thankfully, we have been getting certain orders, especially around the world. There's a lot of interest in BrahMos, which is a joint collaboration between India and Russia, and also Tejas, the Tejas fighter jet, and BrahMos. These are the two main products that India actually can supply to many nations, and we have been doing this. In fact, we think that Egypt can be a good market for this as well. For this also to happen, we have to maintain good relationship with Egypt. Now, the other good part is Egypt usually has been a country that has never supported terrorism. So that is good for India. On the other hand, if you look at it from the side of Egypt, Egypt itself is facing certain issues. Now, what are the issues that Egypt is facing? Let's try and understand this. First issue, high inflation. Now, the problem here is it is not just India, most nations around the world are facing very high inflation, and there are two big reasons for that. First reason, what happened in the pandemic? In the pandemic, we saw a lot of countries, especially the developed countries, distributing a lot of free money to their citizens. US, UK, these kind of countries just printed money and gave it to their citizens that don't worry, we are here to support you. The problem is if you just increase the money supply in the market, eventually it will result into the cost rising and the things will become unaffordable for the people. So inflation is now a global concern, not just India. Look at Western countries, look at UK, etc. It's a huge issue. Second big issue is the Ukraine-Russia war. See, the Ukraine-Russia war is problematic because of various reasons. First, Russia supplies a lot of oil and gas in the international market. Russia also exports a lot of grains. Similarly, Ukraine also exports a lot of grains, and Ukraine also exports a lot of sunflower oil. Because of the war, all of these things got disrupted in the international market. For Egypt, the problem is even bigger. Egypt is not a country where we have a lot of agriculture. Egypt, in fact, has 80% of its supply of grains from Ukraine and Russia. 80% grains of Egypt come from Russia and Ukraine. When the war started, when the supply chains were disrupted, they had a shortage of food grains. Now, what did India do? If you remember, and if you just go back, when this shortage of food grains started, India did announce that we will be giving food grains to many countries around the world. Remember? However, just a few weeks later, India said, no, 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 we cannot give so much food grains. We require our own people to have food grains. We said that rainfall has been lower, so our production might be lower. We cannot give so much. So India backtracked on that promise. However, we did supply certain food grains to Egypt. When I say food grains, I mainly mean wheat and a bit of rice. Wheat and rice is what I mean when I say food grains. So India did supply certain food grains to Egypt, although Egypt wanted much more and they have been asking for more because the supply chain was disrupted from the other side. So India can actually give them more. The problem with Egypt is because of rising oil prices, rising gas prices, rising prices of food grains, Egypt has faced over 20% inflation. In simple terms, something that costed 100 rupees in Egypt is now costing 120 rupees. Something that costed 10,000 rupees in Egypt is now costing 12,000 rupees. So there is about 20% inflation that Egypt is suffering from. So Egypt also wants partners where they can increase their trade, where they can get cheaper things from, because the entire world now has to see how dependent do they want to be on Ukraine and Russia. So basically, it's about both the countries, India and Egypt, now deciding to come close. One other side of the story here is when you talk about any country's relationship with India, it is impossible to ignore the role of China. With Egypt also, China has pretty good relations. I'll give you an example. So Egypt China trade, for example, Egypt China trade is about close to $15 billion. Not the exact figure, but close to 15 to $16 billion. Similarly, Egypt India trade is about half of them. It is about $7.5 billion. So again, this is something that the government has to work towards. The trade that we have with Egypt is not that high. Considering that there's a possibility we have so much food grains, Egypt requires so much food grains, considering all of that, ideally, there should have been much better trade, much better economic prospect between the two nations. That has not happened so far. So it remains to be seen whether we actually go ahead or not. But the good part is we have had great ties historically. We have always collaborated on multiple issues. We need good relationship with Egypt. As I told you, Suez Canal factor, Egypt being a part of the Arab world, being a part of Africa, all of that works in India's favor. There are a lot of things that we import and export with Egypt. For example, the major exports from Egypt to India include raw cotton, oil products, etc. Then major imports into Egypt that go from India are cotton yarn, sesame seeds, herbs, coffee, tobacco, etc. Earlier, if you remember, we had discussed about something called ITEC. I'll just remind you what that is. So, Government of India runs a program called the ITEC. ITEC stands for Indian Technical and Economic Cooperation Program. Now, the ITEC program, in simple ways, is the government's attempt to help as much nations as possible, especially developing and least developed nations. We help them in a lot of ways by giving them scholarships, by offering them farming support, by giving them training on a lot of things, exchanging technology, etc., to build a good image, to build good diplomatic relations. We have done this with Egypt as well. And that is why we are hoping that those relationships come in handy and India and Egypt can actually go ahead and forge an even stronger partnership in the coming years. This is a kind of question that you can expect. India's path towards a permanency in the UNSC goes to the non-aligned movement comment. I'll be happy to answer some questions. You can ask them before I go ahead with the next topic here. It has been answered already by the SME. I told you earlier as well. You do not need to remember different sections of the IPC. Prashant, yes, Egypt does support India. Okay. Uh, UNSC, United Nations Security Council. United Nations Security Council, the UNSC. Those who wanted to go to last slide, this is the last slide. Nothing much to it. Veena has a question. Can you repeat why Suez Canal is important to many countries? Uh, I'll try and draw a map. I am not very good with drawing, but just to get you a very rough idea, this is, let's say, Europe. This is Africa. Let's say this is Asia. Let's try and understand it this way. Okay. Now, what happened was, if there was no Suez Canal, then if a ship has to come from Europe to Asia, they will have to come here. This is route number one. So, what happened was, artificially a canal was dug here so that there is water body from here to here and you can reach Asia. This is called the Suez Canal. There's a place called Suez in Egypt, which is connected to this canal. So the route of this particular trading route, or the length of this trading route, got decreased considerably. So the ships can come here very easily, spending lesser time, spending lesser money, and Egypt takes a commission from all those ships that have to come from here. As simple as that. So Europe and Asia have a lot of trade. So obviously, countries want that the Suez Canal should be accessible to them. Again, my drawing is not very good. You can actually just type Suez Canal and you will see there are a lot of photos that you'll see online. Okay. Then I have a question from Kaju. Sir, can you help how to write these types of answers? Again, see, when you have these kind of questions, especially like, let's say the question is about the importance of non-aligned movement. Wherever India is a member, so let's say India is a member of non-aligned movement, India is in fact a founding member of the non-aligned movement, you have to go with, yes, it is very important, and then you have to support that answer, that yes, it is very important. It gives a chance to India to have as many countries supporting India's candidature in the UN as possible. You have to write about how non-aligned movement is the largest grouping of countries outside the UN. This is where India can become a leader of the developing world. This is where India gets a chance to support, to have a much stronger candidature, so on and so forth. Okay, let's move on then. The next topic, a pretty interesting topic that we have, is about living will and euthanasia. Now, what is euthanasia? Let's try and understand that first, and then we'll come to concept of living will and why was it in the news the last month in January. Now, what exactly is euthanasia? Euthanasia means when you are given a chance or when you can decide whether you want to die or not. So basically, euthanasia means when you get a chance to decide if you want to give away your life or not, not suicide. These are specific different cases. There are two types of euthanasia. Let's try and understand this. There is active euthanasia, there is passive euthanasia. Now, please try and understand this. See, active euthanasia basically, and let's take an example. Let's say there's a person who is very, very ill. Let us assume a person suffering from cancer or COVID or whatever. Okay, the person is very ill. The person is in the hospital getting treatment, etc. Now, if the doctors say, for example, that there is no treatment for this, we will keep you on the ventilator, we'll keep you alive with the help of certain machines, but if we switch off the machines, then you will die. That is called passive euthanasia. Passive euthanasia means when you are in a situation when you cannot be alive naturally, you are just being kept alive by the help of machines, ventilators. When they switch it off, you will pass away automatically. That is called passive euthanasia. Now, then there is something called active euthanasia. Active euthanasia means, let's say you are ill, you have some problem, or you have a lot of pain, you are being treated in the hospital, but you are alive, you are not dying. There is no machine that is keeping you alive, just that you are in a lot of pain. Then let's say you ask the doctor that I don't want to be alive, please give me an injection and kill me. That is called active euthanasia. Active euthanasia means that someone would actually ensure that you die by giving you a lethal injection or medicine, or something has to be given to you. You are alive naturally, you are alive on your own without the help of machine. If you have to be killed actively by giving you something externally to make that happen, that is called active euthanasia. Passive euthanasia means you are just being kept alive with the help of machine, and if the machine is switched off, you will die. Now, the question is it allowed in India? If it is, then which one is allowed? Now, the answer is, in India, passive euthanasia is allowed. India allows this. India allows passive euthanasia. Now, although passive euthanasia is allowed in India, that I'll give you a very simple example of how is it allowed. Let us assume there is someone who is ill, they are in the hospital. Now, when they are in the hospital, what happens is, let's say that there is a lot of treatment going in for them. The family has already spent lakhs and lakhs of rupees. The person is very old, they are just being kept alive on the ventilator. Doctors say that anyways a person will not be normal. Then does the family, or if the family takes a call that yes, we do not want to continue the treatment, then it will be called as passive euthanasia, that please don't continue the treatment, you can actually switch off the monitor. Now, the question here is, what is living will and how does it come in the news? Basically, the concept of living will is simple. Let us assume that the person who was actually very ill, he went in the hospital. Now he is on a ventilator, so he cannot speak. Should you switch off the ventilator or not? Are you understanding it? There is an 80, 90-year-old person who is the patient. He is in the hospital. He is on a ventilator. Now the problem is that person is not conscious, so he cannot decide whether the ventilator should be switched off or not. So the idea is, the person should write in the will, living will, that is, should I be allowed to be killed or not? So living will means, basically means a document which tells whether treatment should continue or not. Whether treatment should continue or not. Whether you want that no, ventilator should not be switched on, should not be switched off, continue as long as you want, or on the other hand, should it, or on the other hand, should the person say no, 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 if I go to ventilator, please switch it off. This document is called living will. Living will basically means choice of the person who decides in advance that if I come in this situation, if I am on the ventilator, should you save me, should you not save me? That is what living will is. Now, why is it that we are discussing this? Why is it in the news? So what has happened is, Supreme Court of India has given certain guidelines how exactly will passive euthanasia work in India and how the law should be applicable. Now, as I told you earlier, for some years now, passive euthanasia is allowed in India under very strict circumstances. However, there are certain loopholes in the law. So Supreme Court has now tried to change certain things in the law. Let's try and understand what are the changes that the Supreme Court has introduced in the concept of living will and in the concept of passive euthanasia. First major thing, before this Supreme Court judgment in January this year, earlier the law was if a living will was to be written, it has to be signed by a judicial magistrate. Only then it would be considered as official. Again, earlier the law was living will should be signed by a judicial magistrate. Only then it would be considered as an official living will. First point. Now it has been changed. Now, no requirement for the judicial magistrate. No problem. Even if a guested officer, like you will be a guested officer when you join the IAS, or if a notary signs on it, that will be good enough. Let me repeat once again. Uh, is the mic again giving you problems? I'm getting some comments about the mic. No? Okay. Okay, mostly people are saying no. Okay. Okay, let's go ahead then. So basically, the earlier law was that the living will only be considered as final if the judicial magistrate also signs on this. But now, judicial magistrate does not need to sign on it. Now, only notary or a guested officer can sign on it. That will be good enough. Number one. Second, earlier, please listen to this. Earlier, the living will, now living will cannot be kept at your home. That will not be valid. Earlier, the living will had to be submitted in the district court. Only if it was submitted in the district court, only then it would be applicable. But now you don't need to submit in the district court. Now, living will has to be uploaded on the National Health Digital Record. National Health Digital Record means it is actually a government online directory where you can just upload the living will. Why? So that doctor anywhere in the country can see this. Because if you deposit or submit the living will in your district court, that means only the hospitals in your district can see that. How will the hospitals apart from your district see that? So now the living will has to be uploaded online on the National Health Digital Record. This is where the living will be taken. Mic is again making noise. Give me 2 minutes, I'll try and change the mic. Give me 2 minutes, I'll try and change the mic, okay? Hi, can you confirm if the mic is, or the sound from the mic is better now? Thank you, Achal. Is it better now? Okay, perfect, perfect, perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you for confirming. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay. So, as I was saying, the second big change that has been introduced is earlier, the living will had to be submitted. It had to be kept in the district court, the local district court. Now it has to be uploaded online on the National Health Digital Record so that doctors anywhere from the country can see this. Now, if the hospital's medical board denies the permission to withdraw the treatment, let's take this example. To understand this one, let us take a very Normal example. Let us assume there is a person whose family member is ill. This family member is on the ventilator. Okay. And now the person says, please switch off the ventilator. We don't want to continue the treatment. We don't have any money left. And we want to just let the person die. Please have passive euthanasia. Even then, let's say the doc hospital's medical board says, no, we cannot do this. Why? How it may happen? The hospital might say that maybe there is a chance tomorrow the person will become healthy. The hospital might say this. So there is a chance that hospital might refuse to withdraw treatment. In that case, what will happen? Again, let me repeat the situation. I am the one and my relative is on the ventilator. I tell the doctor, stop the treatment. We don't want to continue. Let him die. We don't have more money. We cannot afford this. Hospital says, no, we will not stop the treatment because the person may become better tomorrow or after 10 days. In that case, what will happen? In that case, a family members now have an option that you can approach the high court. In that case, you can approach the high court. You can go ahead and ask the high court to actually intervene in this matter, and the high court will then decide and take a call. These are the earlier changes as compared to what is happening now. I will quickly revise all of these changes with you. Earlier, living will had to be attested, means countersigned by a judicial magistrate. Now there is no requirement. Now it can be just attested by a gazetted officer like a grade A officer like yourself or a notary. Second important change, living will was earlier kept with the district court of the district. Now it has to be uploaded on the National Health Record Bureau, that is online. Third major change, do remember this. If let's assume the hospital says that there is no possible treatment, the person will die now of this disease. He might not die right now, he might die after 1 month, 2 months, 6 months, but the person will die. If the hospital says this, that no treatment is possible, earlier, to confirm that, there was a medical board that was formed of 4 doctors having 20 years of experience each. Let me repeat again what I said. Earlier, if the hospital says that there is no treatment possible, there has to be a medical board formed of 4 doctors, 20 years of experience each. Only when the board says that yes, no treatment is possible, then you can switch off the ventilator. Now that has been changed. Now you only require 3 doctors with 5 years of experience, not 20 years. You only require 3 doctors to form a board, 5 years of experience each. They will take a call whether or not there is any medical treatment possible. Earlier, there was no time limit. When would the medical board decide? Now, the medical board has to decide within 48 hours to let the person continue or not. Now, there's a time limit of 48 hours. And the last change, earlier, there were 2 boards. Even now, there are 2 boards. First level was, as I said, doctors of 20 years of experience. They will decide. If the person does not agree with that, then the second level was district collector. Collector will make a board. Now, the 2 levels are doctors with 5 years of experience. If you don't like their decision, now hospital will make another board, not the district collector. This is the difference between district collector, or this is the difference between how the euthanasia decision will be taken. Earlier, the first stage would be doctors, 4 of them having 20 years of experience each. They will decide if a treatment is possible or not. You could appeal against their decision by asking the district collector to make a team. Now, what happens? Doctors having 5 years of experience, they will make a board. If you have to appeal, hospital itself will make a board in that case. We already discussed what is passive euthanasia. Passive euthanasia means when you're not actively killing a person, you were artificially keeping the person alive. Just because you have switched off the machine, just because you have switched off the ventilator, the person has died automatically. That will be called as passive euthanasia, and it is allowed in India now, although under a lot of very specific conditions. Passive euthanasia, for example, as I told you, can only happen or can only be allowed if the medical board says there is no treatment possible now. If there is a treatment possible, then it will not be allowed. It has been allowed in India since 2018. Now, there are a lot of questions, and I see this in the chat as well. How is this allowed if we have Article 21? Article 21 means right to life, right? Now, you might say right to life is one thing. On the other hand, now you are saying that you have the right to take away the life also. Is it not contrary to each other? Actually, no. Supreme Court has said while Article 21 says that you have the right to life, it means that you have the right to live with dignity. So, if you are in a situation where you are not awake, you cannot take care of yourself, you have to have people around you 24/7, even to do the most basic task, asking you to walk, to go to washroom, to make you eat something, for everything. If you're dependent on something else, someone else, then it is not considered as a dignified life. That is where it becomes problematic, and that is why, as per the Supreme Court, dignity is extremely important. That means the person will, in that case, have the right to die as well. Now, many nations have different laws about euthanasia. We were discussing about India. There are different nations. USA has different laws depending on state to state. Canada has announced euthanasia and assisted dying. Assisted dying, those who are asking what is assisted dying, so basically understand the difference. And let me give you an example so that you can understand what is assisted dying. So what happened was this is a incident of a few years back. So a few years back, there was a elderly couple in Maharashtra, I think in their 70s, healthy, fine, no issues with anything, very healthy, no issues. Just that they did not have any children, they did not have any relatives as such. They were two people living together, no issues. They were just fed up of their life, they had nothing to do. So what happened was they wrote a petition to the president, and the petition said that we are not contributing to society in any way. The government is spending money on us in some way or the other. We are consuming electricity, water, etc. It is better that we die. So give us the permission. Obviously, the permission was not given. That will be an example of assisted dying. Euthanasia comes into the picture when you are ill, when you have certain medical condition, when you're not able to improve. Assisted dying means you're fine, absolutely fine. You just don't want to live anymore for whatever reason. So there are some countries that do allow that. So Canada thought of allowing that assisted dying without any medical issues, but many people protested against it because this can be misused also, and that is why the decision has not been implemented. But different countries around the world deal with the question of euthanasia and this law very, very differently. Okay, let's now take a few questions. I see there are a lot of questions that people have in this topic. There seems to be a lot of interest. Let me take a few questions from this topic that have been asked. Okay, let me see quickly. There are a few questions on the previous topic as well. There's a question: how can we link between NAM and UNSC in the question? So NAM is the largest group of countries outside the UNSC. So it allows India the chance to ensure that we can actually make a case for the other countries to support us when it comes to our candidature for the UNSC Permanent Security Council seat. So that is how it can be helpful. It can be helpful for India to establish itself as a leader of the developing world. Okay, let's come to this topic now. Haroon has a question. How will it be ensured that the person has given his consent for passive euthanasia? Family member must be ready. So that is why all these things are done. You have to get attested by an officer. Plus, you can't just keep the will at your home. It has to be in the records of the government so that it is uploaded and everyone can look at it. Obviously, there will always be a possibility of misuse, but that is how it works. You can't just keep the will at home. You have to upload it in the national record. Earlier, you have to keep it in the district court. So that is how it is thought that the government will stop the misuse. Veena is saying, what is the purpose of having a law in euthanasia? See, the purpose is simple. I'll give you a very simple example. Let us assume there is a situation where there is a family, a middle class family, and an 85-year-old in the family, grandmother, grandfather, great grandmother, whatever, they fall ill. Okay. And they are ill, it is their treatment that is going on. Now, at the back of your mind, you also know, even if you're a family member, that even if we spend all our savings, even if we take loan from everyone, even then the person might die in the few months. You would know that, right? When the person is so ill. But just because it's your family, you will continue to spend whatever money that you have, right? There are so many people who are in India, there are so many families who are under debt just because they were spending money for the medical expenditure of their loved ones, even though they knew that the person will not survive. It's a very difficult decision to take. However, at least when you have euthanasia, you have these kind of issue, you have these kind of options at least. So this is where it comes in very handy. No one is saying that you have to basically accept that. Even now, Supreme Court and in India, we hardly really have any case where euthanasia is actually used. Then Tehreem has a question. If in the prelims the question says India has a right to die, what will be the answer? One problem that we have is we randomly make up questions. UPSC does not randomly ask questions. Not every question has a right or wrong answer. So don't worry, UPSC will not ask, does India have a right to die? Okay? Because this is not that simple to understand. We have passive euthanasia, we don't have active euthanasia, we don't have assisted dying. So it's not that easy to understand. Don't make up questions. Like, what if UPSC will ask this, UPSC will ask that? UPSC knows how to make questions. Don't worry about that. Okay, let's see any other question. Okay, perfect. As I told you earlier, India does not allow active euthanasia. Then I have a question from Ashwin. If the person wants to live, but the family have no money, in that case, what can be done? Government hospitals? Simple. That is what government hospitals are for. You will not be charged. See, obviously, the private hospitals can deny treatment if you don't have money. Government hospitals cannot. So you go to government hospital. No one is stopping you from there, right? Anyway, let's then go ahead, see what is the next topic that we have at our hand. So the next topic that we want to take up and we want to discuss is about the marriage laws for minors. Now, if I remember correctly, something like this we did discuss earlier as well in one of the webinars. Now, what exactly is this topic and what is the issue all about? Now, as you know, the issue is mainly related to India having different laws depending upon religion. Now, you also know India does not have a uniform civil code. The one problem that you have by not having a uniform civil code is that different religions are allowed to make different types of laws for a lot of personal things, including marriage, divorce, inheritance of property, etc. Now, because of this, a question has come in the Supreme Court. It's a very simple question. Just understand this. The question is very simple. We have a law in India called Prevention of Child Marriage Act. The Prevention of Child Marriage Act in India, in very simple terms, says that the minimum age for marriage, for example, let's say for boys is 21 and for girls, let's assume it's 18. Now, the problem here that we have is in different laws, there are different types of minimum ages that are given. For example, if you look at the Sharia law, for Muslims, the law says that when a girl hits the age of puberty, that is usually 15, the girl could be married. So, the very simple idea here is what is it that should be followed? Should we follow the Prevention of Child Marriage Act, or should the individual religions be allowed to follow whatever law that they have? This is the simple question that the Supreme Court now has to decide. Whether we follow the law passed by the Parliament, Prevention or Prohibition of Child Marriage Act, should we uphold that, or should different religions be allowed that no problem, you go ahead and you have your own different laws. We don't have a problem with that. Now, why is it in the news? Why is it that this topic has been discussed? Now, it was in the news mainly because the Assam cabinet recently announced that in the state of Assam, any man who marries minor girls should be booked under very strict laws. Now, the definition of minor girl itself is below 18. Minor girl means below 18, as simple as that. So the problem here is, in case of Assam, the Assam government is saying that if you marry a girl below 18, we will punish you. The problem here is, as we discussed, under Sharia law, you are allowed to marry a girl after her age becomes 15. So, what is the balance between the two? Which one has to be followed? Which one is not to be followed? This is what the question is, which the Supreme Court has to take a call on. The legal age for marriage, as I told you, that is we have right now 18 for women, 21 for man. However, different religions follow different perspectives. Under the Muslim personal law in India, a girl can get married upon attaining the age of 15 years. Now, there have been different judgments given by different courts, and that is why this entire question have become quite confusing. And we'll discuss that in just a bit. Different high courts have given different interpretations. That is why it has now come to the Supreme Court that you decide, you tell us whether the national law passed by the parliament in 2006 that has to be followed, or whether different personal laws can be followed or not. Now, as we discussed, child marriage is prohibited in India, but we also know, unfortunately, in many parts of the country, especially in rural areas, we still have the issues of child marriage. We still see a lot of minors being forcefully married in India, especially girls. That has brought a lot of issues in India. Now, there is a history to this case. Please understand this. What happened was, the Punjab and Haryana High Court in June 2022, so just a few months back, they gave an order. The order was, a girl that has attained the age of 15 and above, and the girl is a Muslim, can be married, and it would not be a problem with the law of the parliament. Let me repeat. June 2022, this entire story starts when the Punjab and Haryana High Court said, if there's a Muslim girl who is above 15 years of age and she's a Muslim, she can get married, no problem with that. What did the High Court say? The High Court said that special marriage law does not override the personal laws. The personal laws, if they are followed by a people from their specific religion, they will be applicable. The laws made by the parliament will not override that. Now, this is where it has come at the center of controversy. The National Commission for Protection of Child Rights has said that this order of the Punjab and Haryana High Court is not good, and this commission has now gone to Supreme Court. So no individual person has gone to Supreme Court. It is the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights that has gone to the Supreme Court against this order. They want the Supreme Court to take a call and decide whether this should prevail or not. Now, what is the Supreme Court saying? So far, Supreme Court has not given any final verdict on this. Supreme Court is still deciding, it is still thinking what to do with this. Supreme Court has only said one thing. They have said that until we decide on this matter, we are only saying that the High Court order should not act as a judicial precedent for other courts. Now, what do you mean by judicial precedent? Have you heard or have you read in Indian polity that Supreme Court and High Court are court of records? Remember? Supreme Court and High Court, these are court of records. What do you mean by court of records? Court of records simply means that in case a High Court, let's say, has given an order, that order or that kind of an order will be replicated by other courts as well. So let's say High Court has given the order that yes, a Muslim girl can get married as soon as she turns 15. So ideally, court of record means that other courts in India, lower courts, other high courts, etc., can say that, okay, because that High Court said yes, we will also say yes. Supreme Court has said no, don't do this. Supreme Court has said, let that order be only for that specific case, but at least for now, don't copy this order anywhere. The Supreme Court says, let us decide, let us see what to do in this case. Let us see if the order has to be used as a precedent or not. Judicial precedent means something that actually is then copied in other judgments in other courts as well. Now, as I told you, there are a lot of demands that have been made about ensuring that there is one specific minimum age of marriage across the country. National Commission for Women has also said this. The National Commission for Protection of Child Rights has also said this. But we still have this issue that is not decided properly. We have a lot of girls who are actually caught up in the cases of sexual assault in many parts of the country. These kind of problems still exist in India. And as per the commissions, having a clear cut law about what is the minimum age of marriage would go a long way in solving this problem. Now, if you look at how exactly is it that different states in India are dealing with this issue, there are some states which have not been able to curtail this problem. There are, in fact, 70 districts across 13 states where the prevalence of child marriage is pretty high. States such as Assam, Bihar, even Maharashtra, Rajasthan, UP, Bengal, these states have a pretty high prevalence of child marriage. Now, there are a lot of issues related to child marriage. When someone gets married at a very, very young age on the bodies of the girls, especially, it has a lot of negative impact. The National Family Health Survey 5, I'll just write it here. The National Family Health Survey number 5 said an average of 31.8% of girls in Assam get married at the prohibited age. Just imagine. Almost, or in fact, out of 100, more than 31 girls get married below the legal age. In fact, 11.7% even become mothers before they hit their adulthood. That has a negative impact on their body, and that is carried on throughout their life. Nationally, also, the situation is not that great. It's not just Assam. Nationally, also, it has been seen 6.8%. 6.8% girls become pregnant or become mothers, in fact, before they hit adulthood, before they turn 18. Child marriages are very prevalent in Bihar, in West Bengal, Rajasthan, etc. That is why there is a need to take stringent action in this step. The impact of child marriage, especially, is seen in the health of the girls who get married at a young age, and not just girls. The child that is born out of that marriage also, in most cases, is not healthy enough, because how healthy the child is, whether the child has proper nutrition, whether the child has proper immunity or not, depends a lot on the physical condition, the health of the mother herself. If the mother herself is not even 18, how do you expect that the child born out of her body would actually be healthy? Early childbearing, whenever we see someone becoming mother at a very young age, has a very, very poor impact on their nutrition status. Again, as per the National Family Health Survey number 5, 59% Indian girls from 15 to 19 are actually suffering from anemia. There is a national average of women with 10 or more years of schooling in is only 41%. So not just do we have lower literacy rate, we also have the health related issues, and that only gets higher and higher as we see more girls getting married or being pushed to get married before they even turn adults. Most of the families that go with these kind of issues at a child marriage, forcing the girls to get married at an early age, in most of those cases, it is seen that the poor families are the ones that are doing this. There are various reasons for that. There are issues such as when the poor family thinks that and they should not think like that, but the poor families in many cases think that the girl is becoming a financial burden on them, because their thinking is the girl will get married today or tomorrow or after 2 years, after 5 years anyway. So why not get her married today, so that any money being spent on her is spent by the other family who she gets married into rather than our own family. I know that's a very bad way of thinking, but that is how in a lot of poor families this thinking still exists. Then when the girls get married at such a young age, there is a very, very lower chance for that girl to actually have any power to decide what to do with her body. In most of these cases, the girls do not decide whether they want to get married or not. In most of these cases, there is just a family pressure that the girl has to abide by. And that is why it is very, very important for the girls to come at a certain age and then get married, so that they are not just physically but also mentally much more secure. They know how to take decisions, they know how to take important decisions in their life. And it also allows a chance for the girls to be more financially stable, so that they can be more empowered and they can put forward their view with much more convenience. This is a kind of practice question that you have. Child marriage brings with itself many societal ills. Very simple question. The last 2 3 slides that we discussed, if you just go through last 2 3 slides, that would be good enough for you to answer this particular question that we had, where we discussed the problem that we have because of child marriage. Let me see if there are a few questions. Nishtha has a question. Many things in India are legal as per a particular region, but they can be seen as moral and judged by the court. And if not, why is the Muslim personal law not reformed like other personal laws in India? This is the entire concept of uniform civil code, Nishtha. So the entire idea of uniform civil code was that we have to, let's say, have same kind of laws for everyone. Having said that, there are different ways of interpreting it. For you, you might say that that law is regressive, it should not happen, etc., etc. For someone else, looking at it from some other way, they might see that this is a just law. But again, the problem is you cannot just forcibly say that we will change the law of a certain community. Yes, there is a need to reform the law, and it has been happening gradually. We have seen how issues such as triple talaq has been banned. We have seen these kind of things. But yes, it is only gradually with time that you can change these kind of things. Then I have a question from Saurabh. Isn't dowry the reason for early girl marriages? How can we? I don't think dowry is a specific reason. It can play, but dowry. See, the societies that believe in the dowry system, the societies where you have to give dowry or take dowry, etc., they will take or give dowry, doesn't matter irrespective of the girl age, right? If there's a society that believes in dowry system, the girl might be 25, they'll still take dowry, or the girl might be 15, even then they'll take dowry. The girl parents or the girl family may mostly believe that if we have to anyways give dowry, why to spend more in keeping her at our place? That is a bigger idea basically. As to your question, how can we take care of it? See, the problem again at the end of the day is you cannot expect the government to do everything. There is already a law to ban dowry. There's already a ban to uh, outlaw child marriages also. However, the problem lies with the implementation. The problem lies with how aware is the society that these things are bad, this should not happen. So there is a much bigger grassroots issue that has to be eh, tackled with bringing more awareness, changing the education system itself, making these things a part of our education system. And I've given this example earlier as well, and I'll give the same example once again. Just remember your school days. Remember, in the school days, we used to have a subject called moral science, and we used to have a period for this. Not every day, every second, third day, we used to have a period for moral science. Just remember how many times did it happen that some other subject teacher came and said, I want this period, please give this period to me. My course is lagging behind. Maths teacher will come in, English teacher will come in, science teacher will come in and say, please give me this period. I am lagging behind. Now, I'm not saying that that is why people are actually involved in this, but that just shows you the priority as a society that we give to moral science. Moral science is such an integral part of someone actually growing up, but we don't take it seriously. So when you say how can these problems be corrected, it is not just prohibiting them. That is the easiest part. Government can prohibit whatever they want, but the implementation part, will the people accept it or not? Will the people follow it or not? Depends on how the people have been brought up. That requires a big change at the society level. Hope in the education system makes it slightly better. Anyway, let's go ahead. Now, the next topic, the next article I want to take up is actually from the Kurukshetra magazine. Now, if you have read Kurukshetra magazine, which I hope many of you have, if you have read Kurukshetra magazine, you know whenever Kurukshetra magazine is released, they are usually released on certain themes. Now, the January 2023 Kurukshetra magazine that we had was on the themes of cooperations, cooperative movements, basically. So, when you look at the different cooperative movements, the magazine had a lot of articles. One of the articles where they mentioned about the importance of cooperative movements was realizing Sehkar se Samriddhi. Uh, those who are not Hindi speaking students, those who are from non Hindi speaking background, let me quickly translate this into basically better English. Realizing Sehkar se Samriddhi means Sehkar basically means cooperatives. Samriddhi means when you basically come together and you prosper together, prosperity. So the idea is that if we collaborate together, if we work together in cooperatives, we can all achieve prosperity together. That is what the idea of the Kurukshetra magazine's article is. Now, what are cooperatives? How do they work? Let's try and understand this first. Okay. Now, what is cooperative? How do they work? In simple terms, you can say cooperatives are like companies only. The difference being in a cooperative, people usually work at the same level and they usually have equal powers and there's no hierarchy as such. So when you work in a company, for example, what will happen is in a company, there will be a boss that you will report to. He will report to someone else, and he will report to someone else, or he or she, whatever. And also, you would see that different people have different powers. For example, in a normal company, do you think a person at a lower level, let's say someone who has just joined, someone who is at a lower level, can they take a big decision about how the company will run? Most probably not. Their their view will not be counted. On the other hand, if the top boss says that this should happen, then doesn't matter what the other people say, that will happen in the company. That is how usual companies work. Cooperatives work on different concept. Number one, cooperatives don't have employees, they have members. Cooperatives have members and not employees. So the difference is because cooperative have members and not employees, they all have equal powers. They all have equal powers. So basically, if there is an important decision that has to be taken in how a cooperative should run, what kind of things should we sell, what price, etc., then there is equality of decision making. Also, in most cases, profits, for example, are equally divided. Profits are also divided equally. Doesn't matter how exactly is it that the person got the job, doesn't matter what the level of the person is. That is what the cooperatives are. Now, in India, we have a long history of cooperatives. The most successful example of cooperatives, as many of you would know, is Amul. By far, the most successful example of any cooperative in India is Amul. Now, usually, usually when you talk about cooperatives, it is very rare that a company like Amul is made in cooperatives. Because in usual cases, when you talk about cooperatives, they actually work in the field of agriculture. So usual cooperatives are in the field of agriculture. I'll tell you how. When you look at China, for example, China has a very long history. About 40 years back, they realized that we have to take up this model of cooperatives and use this in our farming. How? So, what China did was, let us assume that there is let me add a new slide. So China said that okay, let's assume there's a farmer who has this land, then a farmer who has this land, then a third farmer, then there's a fourth farmer with this much land, fifth farmer has this much land, then there's a sixth farmer, so on and so forth. So right now what happens is there are different pieces of land. This farmer may have the money, he might ensure that he can produce a lot of things here, but other farmers don't have money, so on this land nothing will happen. So what Chinese government did was forcefully, people did not want it, Forcefully, the Chinese government told the farmers, you have to combine your land. That all of that has to come together. All of you will work together, divide your functions. Someone will have the let's say responsibility of sowing the seeds, someone will have the responsibility of irrigation, someone will take the responsibility of harvesting, someone will market it, someone will sell, etc., etc. That will be called cooperative farming. So usually when you talk about cooperatives, the idea is about cooperative farming that we had. Now, do you think in this case number 4 will like it? Number 4 will not like it. He will say, oh, I am the rich farmer. Why would I give my land to others? Why do I share my land with others? I can hire these people on my land. Number 4 will not like it. But this is where you have to understand China is not like India. And China is not like any other country. If you don't like the decision of the government, either you just basically go to the jail, or you can't really do anything against the government. If the government says that your land has to be combined, it will be combined no matter what. In fact, thousands of people were killed by the Chinese government, whoever protested against the government's decision. And China at the end decided and went ahead with this cooperative farming. Now, this cooperative farming is just an example of how cooperatives work. The same model is applied to other places as well, such as Amul as well. The biggest advantage is that it ensures a collective prosperity. There are good sides and bad sides to cooperative. The good side to the cooperative is everyone who is involved, all the members will be taken care of. No member will have a problem, oh, I am not earning, I cannot sustain, etc. The bad problem is if you are in a cooperative, you cannot imagine I will become very, very rich, much richer than other people. So that is the distinguishing factor. Everyone will become prosperous. Prosperity is guaranteed for everyone if you work honestly in a cooperative. But no one can assume that I will become a billionaire because I am the owner of cooperative. That will not happen. So if you think that in a society, in a democracy, you require someone to become very rich, if you want to become very rich, then the cooperative is not really for you. But on the other hand, if you want prosperity for everyone, then the cooperative is suitable for you. Usually, these are how the cooperatives usually work. These are the principles of cooperatives. They are voluntary and open membership. So if you want to become a, let's say you live in that area and there are some people running a cooperative, you can also join them. In most conditions, in most situations, they will not put any condition that no, 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 you can't join. They are open, voluntary organizations. That democratic member control, as I told you, doesn't matter how powerful you are, doesn't matter what is your situation or what is the position in the company, everyone will have same equal powers. Members participate together. If let's say they say that we required 1 lakh rupees to start the business, then everyone will contribute. All the members equally will contribute economically. They have independence, autonomy. They don't listen to any outside stakeholders. They also ensure proper training, information, education to be given to their members. There's also cooperation between different cooperatives. One cooperative will help others, and they mostly and more importantly have a concern for their community. So their main idea is not that someone should become very rich or we'll become very rich. The main idea, as we discuss again, is prosperity for as many people as possible. The reason why it was in the news, it is covered in the Kurukshetra magazine also, is that the government of India recently has also realized the importance of cooperatives. And that is why, if you remember, in 2021 July, there was in fact a new ministry set up by the government called Ministry of Cooperation. Ministry of Cooperation specifically, and Minister Shri Amit Shah was given the responsibility for this. The Ministry of Cooperation specifically was established for this purpose only, to make sure that government gives special importance to cooperatives. And this is not just today. Since our independence, we have realized this. See, when India became independent, India was a developing nation, no money at all. When you have a situation where common people, individuals do not have a lot of money, then there are only two options. Either the government will come in and government will say, don't worry, you don't have the money, we will give you the money, we will develop everything. But that problem is, government of India itself did not have a lot of money when we became independent, so that model did not work. The other option is, individuals with small amount of money can come together and say that okay, we will work together. This is how the cooperatives were formed. That is why India has had a very long history of cooperatives. There are many states that have seen cooperatives, especially Gujarat, Maharashtra, etc. All of these cooperatives actually, sorry, all of these cooperatives have ensured that there is a widespread growth in different sectors of the society. This Sehkar se Samriddhi mainly aims at ensuring that the benefit of growth is actually spread all across and not just to a few people. These cooperatives have been working in different fields: agriculture, we just discussed that, primary production, fisheries, etc. All of these are different types of sectors in which the cooperatives are working. The cooperatives also are ensuring that the fruits of development is spread all across. There is not much difference in the earning of different members in the cooperatives. The biggest advantage of these cooperatives include that we have ensured that there are enough people who gain financial stability. Look at Amul. The option of Amul is such an amazing option of how cooperatives have been able to provide livelihood to lakhs and lakhs of farmers. Amul ensures that everyone is taken care of, those who are working for them, be it someone who has certain animals of their own, or be it someone working in different capacity. The government has been supporting Amul also for in many of the instances. In fact, when we had the COVID-19 lockdown, while other companies were struggling, firing people, not giving them enough jobs, Amul was in fact expanding and ensuring that across the entire country they have even more setups to even increase the income of their members. Having said that, there are some issues that the cooperatives in India still face, because of which we do have certain very small success story, like Amul is a success story, Lizzat Papad is a success story. But overall, we cannot say there are thousands of cooperatives that are working very well in India. So there are some issues that the cooperatives are still facing. For example, there are imbalances in certain states that are working well. Gujarat, for example, has a lot of cooperatives. Rajasthan has many cooperatives. These are the state governments that have given promotion, that have ensured that cooperatives actually work properly. On the other hand, some other states have not given it that kind of importance. Many cooperatives don't operate properly, they don't have proper leadership, they don't know how to build a business, they don't get any help from the government. A lot of times, members don't cooperate with each other. Some members want more power, some members want more profit, and there's always an issue between them. They are not able to have more technical knowledge and awareness. They don't know how to compete with other companies, and that is why a lot of times the cooperatives have still not been able to achieve the kind of success that is usually hoped from them. And that is why there is still an issue that we are facing in the field of cooperatives. Again, the question is about the issues of cooperatives. Why is India's cooperative sector still lagging despite a long history in the sector? Again, the last slide that we discussed, that slide, if you just elaborate on that, will be good enough to answer this question as well. The issues that we are facing mainly in the case of cooperatives. There are a few questions. Let me quickly take those up before we move on to the last topic. There's a question that I have: how the people of China survive then in such a condition? They survive by abiding by the government. Simple. They know if they don't abide by their government, if they don't agree with the government decision, then it will be difficult for them to survive. So they survive by abiding by whatever their government says. Then I have a question: how Amul is called as an example of cooperative movement? Because it is a cooperative. So Amul, all the farmers that work with Amul, all the people, so the milk that you get from Amul, so there are thousands and lakhs of farmers who actually contribute milk to Amul. Then what they do is they then test that milk, similar kind of milk or similar quantities mixed. Other milks are actually then mixed as per their different qualities. So there's a team of thousands and lakhs of people working together to bring that milk. All of them have been given equal shareholding of the Amul cooperative. That is how they're cooperatives. Sridevi is saying now China population is declining, then also they're punishing the people. It's not. See, when you say China's population declining, doesn't mean that they're getting over tomorrow, right? Declining population doesn't mean that they will have to basically think that now we have to change everything. That is how the government in China works. Their policy has always been make sure we have such strong control over the people that they abide by all our policies. Different countries, different governments have different types of policies. That is how China works. Sneha saying, what if the person does not have living will while dying? Then nothing will happen. Then, just like we normally have the situation. See, living will is a recent concept, right? So before the living will, what used to happen? Nothing. The same will happen even today. That is, the person will be in the hospital. The family usually then decides that if they don't have the money, they want to take them to government hospital. The same will apply. Before the living will, also we had this kind of system in place. Shiva is saying, why is there no helping hand from the government in the cooperative sector? There is some helping hand in certain states. Gujarat, Rajasthan, Maharashtra also to a certain extent are good examples. Other state governments might not have realized the importance. Other state governments might think that that doesn't have a lot of potential. Depend on state to state government. Then Nazia is saying, how far the proposed MSCS 2022 addresses the issue of cooperative. I think you would have to write the full form. I'm not sure what MSCS means. So I don't know what exactly are you talking about MSCS. Maybe if you can give a full form of MSCS, I don't know. Anyway, these are the questions given to me so far. Let's move on to the last topic that we have for you today. And after that, you can keep on asking whatever questions you have. So the next topic that I wanted to discuss with you is about a temple which is slightly famous in some parts of the country, not everyone, but this was covered in the news because sea winds erosion is actually happening in the Sundarbans temple. Now, where exactly is this temple? What is the issue? The temple is known by another name called Jata Duel. So Sundarbans temple is not the official name. Jata Duel is the official name. It's a 11th century terracotta Shiva temple and is situated in West Bengal near the Sundarbans, and that is why it is called the Sundarbans temple. Now, the reason why it is in the news is because the Archaeological Survey of India is saying that the outer wall of the temple is getting eroded and some bricks are now facing corrosion because of all the winds that blow because it is very near to the Bay of Bengal. Now, the reason why this temple has been able to survive for a long time, even though it is very close to the sea, it is also very close to all these water bodies, it's just made up of bricks. The reason is that there are a lot of trees that act as barrier to these winds, and that is why a lot of erosion gets reduced. But as more and more trees fall down, as the distance between the coast and the temple becomes clear, as there are lesser trees, we have more and more erosion that we see. Now, if you have been to Konark Temple, the Sun Temple in Konark, you would say that that is also very near to the coast. If you have gone to Konark, I have visited that temple. It's very, very near to the coast of Konark. Now, you might say, why is that not eroding? The difference is in what is the substance that is used to make these temples. The Konark temple is used making stones. So when you have the Konark temple, which is actually made of stones, that does not have that kind of an impact of the wind erosion. On the other hand, when you have a terracotta brick temple, bricks get eroded with this in a much easier manner. This is a photo of the temple, as you can see here. Look at the upper portion. This is where erosion is mainly happening. The lower portion is still much fine because the lower portion again is protected by the trees nearby, so the wind doesn't hit it directly, but it is the upper portion that has the issues. This temple, it's an 11th century temple and it is made in the remembrance of Lord Shiva. This temple actually has a very interesting kind of a structure as well. It is considered as Kalinga type of architecture. As per archaeologists, the temple was constructed in about 975 AD as per a copper plate that was found near the temple. The person behind this temple's construction was Raja Joy Chandra. This has been classified by the Archaeological Survey of India as a monument of national importance as well. Those who could not see the photo, don't worry. When you get the PPT, you can download the PPT. You can see the photo in the PPT. Don't worry about that. As I told you, the temple in itself is considered as a Kalingan style of architecture. So there are different types of temple architecture that we have: the Dravida style, the Nagara style, the Visara style, and we also have the Kalinga style of architecture. As the name suggests, that was mainly prominent in Odisha and the places nearby Odisha that you see here. It's inspired from the Dravida form of temple architecture, but slightly different as compared to that. This is built over a raised platform, and it also has a gateway that allows you to reach up to the sanctum. So there are different types of walls that are decorated with these bricks, but most of the decoration in those bricks has been lost because of the erosion. These are a few details about this form of architecture that you see. The Kalinga form of architecture mainly has three types of temples: the Rekha dweller, Pira, and the Khakhar. Rekha means line. So those temple designs that have specific lines made on them, which have different parts of a line made of them on their structure, will be called a Rekha dwella. Dwella will be a name that is given to temple. Pira dwella will be square building, basically a pyramid shaped roof. And then we have the Khakhar dwella, which is very, very similar to the Dravidian Gopuram design that is built in the Dravidian architecture style. Not a lot of very important information to remember here. The last topic that we discuss mainly is relevant for the prelims examination in one way. You have to read about this temple. Where is it? To which god is it dedicated? What is the kind of architecture? That should be good enough. And the person behind this. Because UPSC in the prelims examination, especially, has made it a kind of habit that even if there's a very short news in the Hindu newspaper or the Indian Express about some very old temples, they might ask that in the prelims examination. So, just a few facts. Remember the god it is dedicated to, where is it, who built this, the location. That would be good enough. For the mains examination point of view, you can expect this type of question. What is wind erosion? What are different types of landforms created due to wind erosion? Something that you usually study in geography. It's a pretty common topic that you would study or you would have already studied in your geography. This brings me to the end of this webinar. If there are a few questions, I'll be happy to take a few of them before we end this webinar. Let me see quickly. Okay. Deepika is saying bricks are made from mud, and mud, then how are they supposed to get corrosion? So basically, corrosion, it's again, corrosion is not something that you only have in metal. So when, let's say, you have bricks and they are losing their shape because of the wind speed, that also is considered as corrosion only. Then, uh, okay. How far is the proposed multi-state cooperative society 2022 addresses the issue of cooperatives? They no, multi-state cooperative societies don't address the issue of cooperatives. That is just basically an additional form of cooperatives under which it will be working in more than one state. So more of the discretion will be with the central government rather than with one specific state government. But having multi-state cooperative movements doesn't really solve the problem that the cooperatives have. That still remains intact. Perfect. So this brings me to the end of the session. Thank you so much for joining in. I hope your preparation is going fine. Do make it a point to read the UPSC notification that has come out as soon as possible. Try and fill up the form also. Don't wait for the last date. Get your documents in place, especially if you are someone who is looking for reservation of any kind and who is looking to get those documents made. Please make sure your dates are in order, your certificates are in order as soon as possible. Thank you so much for joining in. Have a good night. Bye bye. Jai Hind.